Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to call this meeting of the Springfield City Council's Committee of the Whole to order. I want to recognize the councilors that are present in person, Councilor Perez, Councilor Click Bruce, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Allen, and Councilor Fenton. And present virtually are Councilor Brown, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Davila, and Councilor Govan. I'm going to begin the meeting with some opening remarks. We're then going to hear from some of the individuals who have been invited to testify as to the status of the implementation of the Board of Police Commissioners, as well as...
Councilor Whitfield is here too. Councilor Whitfield is here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. As I was saying, we will hear first from some of the individuals who have been invited to update the City Council and the public on the status of implementation of the DOJ consent decree, as well as the implementation of the Board of Springfield Police Commissioners. We will then open it up to questions from members of the council, and then we will conclude by discussing our next steps. Before I jump into opening remarks, I do want to share a couple of announcements. Once again, for councilors, your microphones are on and broadcasting at all times, unless you hover over the mute button. When you do address the audience, we would ask that you speak directly into the microphones so that the public is able to hear you both in the chamber as well as those that are watching the hearing at home and virtually. The other thing I would like to announce is that, consistent with our past meetings, the Health Commissioner, Helen Calton-Harris, continues to advise that individuals who are present in the chamber should consider wearing masks when they are not speaking. If you would like a mask and do not have one, we do have them available for you at the front of the entrance to the City Council chambers. So to get started, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I want to thank really, every individual who's joined us in good faith for the Committee of the Whole meeting, including members of the public, members of the City Council, the City Solicitor John Payne, and Deputy Chief Stephen Kent. I also can share with you that Kathleen O'Toole, the head of the DOJ Compliance Evaluation Team, is also observing the proceedings virtually. Mrs. O'Toole and other members of the team are not able to answer questions today due to the structure of their agreement. However, they will be present at future hearings following the release of their first report. Last month, I announced my intention to hold quarterly Committee of the Whole meetings on both the implementation of the Board of Police Commissioners and the consent decree issued by the Department of Justice, because I think that both of these issues, and I think we would all agree, are of monumental importance to Springfield, and they deserve the consistent attention of the entire City Council. I also believe that the important work of reform should not take place behind closed doors. Residents and officers deserve to know the status of these reforms, as well as the associated successes and challenges. It's my intention that these meetings will give counselors, the public, and members of the department the opportunity to receive consistent updates on the status of implementation, opportunities for counselors to bring forward questions that they have or questions that they have on behalf of the community, and for members of the Police Commission and administration to identify issues that have arisen with implementation. In this sense, I view these meetings as a checkpoint in implementation, and it's my hope that where challenges do exist, we can use this as an opportunity to work together in good faith in identifying solutions. If we are doing our jobs, all of us should leave here with work to do and be prepared to return with updates in that regard. Our shared goal, and my goal, is about creating a fair and transparent system of accountability, professionalism, and checks and balances that the public and members of the department can trust and rely on. So we have two agenda items this evening. Again, implementation of the DOJ consent decree and implementation of the Board of Police Commissioners ordinance. I think it probably makes sense perhaps to start with implementation of the DOJ consent decree, since that is in a bit of an earlier stage, and we may be able to cover that in a little bit less time than we may with the Board of Police Commissioners ordinance. And so I would invite to step forward the City Solicitor, Judge John Payne, and we would hear a brief update on the DOJ consent decree, where we stand now, and we will then take any questions on that process. To the extent that the DOJ consent decree interacts with the implementation of the Board of Police Commissioners ordinance, I think it might make sense to cover those questions during the portion on the Board of Police Commissioners. Judge, you may want to take the podium so you can have access to the microphone. And Solicitor, I'd recognize you at this time for any comments and updates you'd like to share on the DOJ consent decree.
All right, thank you very much, Counselor. I would indicate that the DOJ settlement agreement which has been adopted and accepted by the court, is in place. We now have a compliance evaluator. The team has been working with the Department of Justice and with the City of Springfield to move forward to put in place the policies that we are working on right now. The policies are moving forward, I think, in a very effective manner. We have an excellent working relationship with the officials from the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We meet weekly as a group to discuss the progress that we're making. I think several of the policies are actually ready to go into practice to become policies of the department so that the officers can receive those policies and begin the process of in-service training. Captain Brian Bellevue is working just at a tremendous clip, has a great relationship with the Department of Justice officials. And again, we're making enormous progress. I think progress that both sides are happy with. We work very collegially with each other when there are disagreements and when there are concerns. We work them out in a professional manner, and nothing has held us up at this point. There are a couple of policies that are not finished yet, one of them being the policy with respect to the Internal Investigation Unit, and what is holding that up right now is the issue of certain matters that are before the collective bargaining issues before the Patrolmen's Union and the Supervisors Union. But other than that, I'll answer any questions that you might have, but we have a good working relationship. We're comfortable with what the compliance evaluator is doing. They will begin looking at the policies themselves, and then once they are actually in effect with the department, which I expect to happen very, very quickly, they will be monitoring to make sure that we're doing the proper training and that the policies are being followed by the officers and by the supervisory staff at the police department. So that's my report with respect to that matter.
Thank you, Solicitor Payne. I know that Deputy Chief Steve Kent is also with us. Deputy, would you like to add anything further?
I'm all set, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll entertain questions for the solicitor relative to implementation of the DOJ consent decree. Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Judge Payne, thank you for your work on this matter. We, at a recent meeting, discussed the interaction between the DOJ's involvement with the city, the consent decree, and the impact that may have on the newly constituted police commission's ability to develop policies and procedures that would create a clear delineation for how, in particular, complaints are treated and what the process flow looks like for that. Could you speak to that just a little bit, specifically about how the consent decree affects that and what steps you think the commission will take to start to develop those procedures?
Well, one of the policies that is being developed right now is a policy specifically regarding the Internal Investigation Unit. As I say, we've made a lot of progress in developing that policy. I think the Department of Justice is happy with what we have done. We've tried to make it as clear and as concise as possible so that the public, if they want to look at that policy, can see the procedures and the protocols to be followed. Again, I think the Department of Justice is comfortable with where we are. One of the issues that we have to deal with right now is, again, there are some collective bargaining issues that are still outstanding, and when those are resolved, hopefully in the near future, we will be able to implement that policy fully. And again, it sets out very clearly the responsibilities of the department. When a person makes a complaint to the IIU in the various methods that have been set out, both from the standpoint of a written report right up to an anonymous telephone call, or I guess, I don't know if text messages are ever anonymous, but certainly right up to the point of an anonymous telephone call. Every complaint will be processed and handled pursuant to the policy, and then the commission follows what happens after a complaint is investigated. When a complaint is investigated by the IIU and by the IIU attorney, and when it has gone in front of the superintendent, a determination is made as to complaints that necessarily have to go in front of the commission because of the nature of the complaint, the seriousness of the complaint, and the fact that it could involve significant discipline up to and including termination. So when a matter is ripe for that issue, it goes in front of the commission, and the process starts where a hearing can be scheduled and a hearing takes place.
And just to follow up on that, Judge, the scope of the consent decree, my initial understanding of the DOJ's involvement was that it was initiated as a result of investigations into the narcotics unit, and that as time went on, the scope of that involvement in the consent decree expanded greatly. The consent decree, and forgive my lack of specific knowledge on the jurisdiction of it, but the consent decree and DOJ is interested, aren't they, in how we ultimately investigate complaints against the police department. Is that right? That the consent decree extends to matters regarding police misconduct?
Well, it does in the sense that we are setting up a specific policy with respect to the internal investigation unit, how complaints are received, how they are investigated, how determinations are made about what sort of discipline might be appropriate, and then when the matter requires the involvement of the commission, that takes place. But that's certainly one of the areas that the consent decree, the settlement agreement, set out. Basically, it's the IIU issues and it's use of force policies. The consent decree, the settlement agreement, did not have to involve a large number of the policies of the police department. They're basically focused on the area of use of force and the internal investigation unit. And
right.
That's been the focus of the settlement agreement.
And as a part, and thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me the time, but as a part of that involvement for DOJ, would you expect that they would have an active role, a participatory role maybe even, in the ultimate procedures that are laid out for how IIU investigations are conducted, and in turn, if and when the police commission becomes involved in an investigation?
Well, I'm sorry, Counselor, maybe I just have not explained it well, but that's exactly what the IIU policy is set out to do. It sets out the procedures, again, by which a complaint is received, how it is investigated, how the determination is made to bring it in front of the commission if that's what is appropriate, and then how the commission holds its hearings. And we're working on the specific policies of the hearings and so forth. But the IIU, which entails all of these aspects I think you've asked about, that's one of the policies that we're putting into place. And the Department of Justice obviously is actively involved with the department in writing and drafting that policy. The policy, once we are finished, will be reviewed by the compliance evaluator, and once we've both signed off on that, the Department of Justice and the city, and the compliance evaluator believes that it complies with the settlement agreement, it will then be a part of the policies and procedures of the police department, and how the IIU and the officers involved with the IIU will work with dealing with those complaints and working with the commission when the matter comes before them.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would just say that in summary, and particularly in light of my recent experience as a member of the Residency Compliance Commission that had a similar charge of taking on enforcement of a really important municipal function and doing it in a way that hadn't been done in recent history, The policies and procedures of the commission are a critical element to beginning proper and efficient function of a group that all members of this council are proud to have returned to the residents of the city of Springfield. And the thing that Judge Payne's comments highlights in particular is the complicated web and matrix of decision-making that goes into establishing those policies and procedures. The Residency Compliance Commission, by way of example, has been working extensively. I have committed hundreds of hours to this task over the course of the last 9 to 10 months, and we are just now in the process of taking a vote, actually tomorrow, on our final policies and procedures. And based on Judge Payne's testimony, I think that the commission has the very daunting task of establishing procedures and policies that not only address the city law department concerns, but also the IAU, the police department, the commission, and the DOJ through its consent decree. And I want to thank the members of that commission for stepping forward to a very difficult task and doing so at a time that the city requires smart and honest people to come forward to do this work. I want to thank them for that effort and offer myself and I'm sure the rest of the council's full support in assisting with that endeavor, which is really important to the future of the city and the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fenton. So we have a number of councilors who are present virtually, and a number of them do have their hands up in the queue. So what I'm going to do for this hearing, and in fairness to the members that are present in person and do not have the ability to hold their space in line, I'm going to go virtual, in person, virtual, in person. So the next councilor that we will hear from is virtual, and that is Councilor Brown. And following Councilor Brown, we will hear from a councilor in person. That will be Councilor Allen. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Judge, for being here. My father is a retired captain. He was head of internal affairs, Captain Larry Brown. So I'm very familiar with the ongoings. I'm a cop kid. I definitely respect police. My thing is really integrity. Now, I know as far as, and these are statements that I've researched and I do know. What are we doing as far as notifying and handling the issue with Brady cops? Cops who actually got caught lying and now they're legally aren't supposed to go and testify. Now I do, Judge, are we doing anything to handle any of that? As far as them actually being able to now address and the ongoing of even with the commission and everything.
Well, I think that the issue regarding any Brady list, the city, the department, the police department is working with the district attorney's office. There is a list. There is a list, and we work with what we have to deal with respect to that matter.
Now, that actual list, is it a way to make that public? Because there have been incidents where my issue, and why I bring it up, is where my issue is that there are actually cops who are on that Brady list who are not supposed to go and testify because they got caught lying, and they actually go and testify. Is there a way to have access to that list publicly? Can the public have access to the Brady cop list? Well, and that is just basically cops who have lied. So integrity-wise, I believe we should know, and they shouldn't be able to testify. And not only do they testify a lot of times against minority people. They get caught lying.
Well, the Brady list is actually under the control of the district attorney's office. It's not under our control. So that's something that I think would have to be taken up with the district attorney. And I'm not sure that that's whether it's a public list or not, I don't know, and I would defer to the district attorney as to whether or not he would consider it a public list.
So the police officers, and Judge, I don't, I don't really, like, once again, I do understand how it works, so I don't really want to take up the public's time. The police officers understand who are Brady cops or not, correct?
I assume they do.
Yes, the answer is yes, sir. Is there a way for them to compile the list? Is there someone there who can give us that list?
Well, again, that list is under the control of the district attorney. It's not under our control. And I would defer to the district attorney's office as to whether or not they would be willing or are able to make that a public document.
Because one thing I do, I defend cops. I love cops, but it's about integrity. And these are cops who are actually lying, and now they're going in front of these different boards and different, they're on record. They cannot legally testify or do any of that stuff, and they are doing it. So that one thing, I would like to try to find a list, because there's a lot of Black and Latinos and people who are getting falsely accused. And I also, another thing is, when we talk about unions, do you know the different unions that are on? Because I know this police union is very strong. Now, you said there was like a captain union or anything?
Well, there's a supervisors union, and there's the patrolmen's union.
Okay. And I know it has nothing to do with you, Judge. You do a great job. But so for everyone's FYI, I believe that we should have a minority union in there to represent people of color. The unions are very powerful. A lot of times, a lot of police officers can't be fired because of those unions. I would believe that we can have a union of color created. I've asked for it. I know you don't have anything to do with it. And once again, Judge, I really appreciate all the hard work that you do. You're definitely an icon, and thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. We will now go to Councilor Allen in person, followed by Councilor Govan, who is virtual. Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Solicitor Payne, with your answers you've already given us, or this description you've already given us, I'm starting to understand the role of, I guess, your role and IIU's role and the police commission's role. There are a couple other groups that I'm trying to figure out, there seems to be 5, 6, 7 organizations involved in this whole process, DOJ and the people I just listed. Could you delineate for me the role of Attorney Kevin Murphy and the O'Toole Associates, what their jobs are relative to this whole situation?
Sure. As part of the settlement agreement, in the establishment of the rules and regulations regarding the Internal Investigation Unit, there was a requirement that an attorney be designated as the IIU attorney. This is a part-time position. This attorney looks at every complaint that comes in, makes certain recommendations as is required, and moves the matter along. The attorney does not deal with the prosecution of the matters in front of the commission, but deals with the complaint from the point it comes in until it gets to the stage as to what sort of discipline, if any, is going to be implemented. And the compliance evaluator, that is a position, again, that is part of the settlement agreement. It usually comes into play on these sort of agreements across the country. This is an independent body. In this case, it's a 3-person group, the O'Toole Associates, and they have been in town now several times over the last month and a half. Last week, they held a public gathering at the Ray Jordan Center to basically a meet and greet, And at some point over the next several months, they will be coming back and having a public hearing to discuss where they are. They have to file reports on a regular basis, and their job is to, again, first to look at the policies and procedures that the city and the Department of Justice agree upon, make sure that that meets their the standards for the settlement agreement, and then they will monitor over the course of the next couple of years to make sure that the city is complying with the settlement agreement as set out with the federal court.
Okay, that's clear to me. Just on Attorney Murphy, so his role is with the IIU, is the attorney for the IIU?
He's the attorney for the IIU as set out in the settlement agreement.
So if they need legal advice or whatever, they would go to him rather than to you?
I'm not sure that they would go to him for legal advice. He's there to take the information that is received in the complaint, to assist in the investigation that takes place, make certain recommendations and so forth, but he will not be serving as the city's prosecutor if a matter comes up for a disciplinary hearing in front of the commission.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Allen. Councilor Govan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Judge Payne, for explaining what the implementation of the DOJ consent decree is supposed to be. So I guess my questions are concerning the reason why we have this consent decree is because the city, the initial IIU investigators and the police officers who committed the crimes that they did weren't able to be properly, I guess you would say, monitored and corrected by the police officers, right? Because that's what the IIU is. So my concern is that the Board of Police Commissioners seems to be far removed from what we initially wanted to do when we put a police commission in place. The complaints don't get to the police commission. And I'm concerned that a lot of those complaints are going to be, maybe mishandled, I don't know, as they have been in the past. I just don't want to see history repeat itself and find ourselves in the same position that we were 5-10 years ago. So I don't know that I have a question necessarily, but I guess I have some serious concerns about where in line the police commission is. And Attorney Murphy is the attorney for the IIU. Where is the support for the police commission? Right now I don't see where the police commission is being supported. The police commission was put in place for a reason. It was fought against very, strongly, but it's here because, the state Supreme Court decided that it's a reasonable thing for the city of Springfield to have a board of police commissioners. So is there going to be a way for us to be able to support the police commission and have them do the job that we asked them to do? I guess is my question.
Well, Counselor, let me state a couple of things. One, the Board of Commissioners, police commissioners, can contact IIU at any time and ask for a breakdown of the number of complaints that have been filed, where certain complaints might be, what might be coming their way generally. But you cannot have a complaint come into the department and immediately go to the police commission. Once you do that, you have limited the police commission's ability then to hear the matter. The cases come to the police commission when the investigation is ripe for their involvement. Otherwise, if they get involved early on and it gets to a point where it has to be a hearing, those commissioners may have to recuse themselves from hearing the case. And quite frankly, if they became involved in the case early on and then heard the case and imposed discipline, I would suggest to you very strongly that any appeal to the Civil Service Commission or to the labor arbitrator would result in that discipline being flipped and being back to that issue. The commission has the ability to use the IIU facilities up on Page Boulevard. They have access to the services up there if they need them. They can meet there, and they have the ability to contact the law department with any concerns or questions they have for support or an explanation as to what their duties and responsibilities are and moving forward.
Okay, I don't know if my question was answered, but again, I'm just very concerned. I know that you're going to talk about the police commission in a minute, but I'm just very concerned that the police commission is not being, like I said, supported. They don't have an office space. I know that the Page Boulevard site is accessible to them. However, that's not convenient for the public. If the public were to try to contact them or to reach out to them, there's no way for the public to do that. And a lot of times, you know, the residents have concerns, as Council Brown said. You know, a lot of times Black and brown people are, you know, harassed by police officers. And, you know, I had a resident come to me a while ago, and, you know, their 15-year-old son was beat up by the police. And, you know, I said, well, why didn't you report it? You know, I said, report it to who? The police? You know, the police can't police the police. So that's my main concern. So I don't know that if this is the time that we're going to get those answers, but I just want to get on record as stating that I am very concerned that the police commission that's in place is not being supported, and it's not being allowed to do the job that I think that we want them to do. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Judge Payne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. And to Councilor Govan's point, shortly we will move into a discussion exclusively on the police commission, but certainly I recognize there's certainly interaction between the DOJ consent decree implementation and certainly the Board of Police Commissioners. At this time, we'll go to Councilor Whitfield, who is remote.
Sorry, Mr. President, I'm also on my phone and I'm trying to navigate this system. So I just wanted to say thank you to Judge Payne for the explanation on the consent decree. But I am going to address some concerns, but then I do have like just one question. I have a concern with how the attorney, Murphy, was hired. It was, per your explanation, he asked for this position. It wasn't a transparent process that he was hired. And so I feel like it's just going to be like Councilor Govan said, more of the same. If we keep bringing in our acquaintances, because I don't know how friendly you all are. I'm not saying that he's a bad person or even that he wouldn't have been chosen if there was a fair and transparent hiring process, but that didn't take place. And the reason that we know this is because Councilor Hurst dug into the funding that was going to pay his salary when you guys were asking for a transfer. And we found out that, you know, his salary was included in that, but then the law department still came up with a way to hire him through their budget. And I like that alone gives me pause on how fair this new process is going to be if we're going to continue to take the same measures and hire acquaintances, friends, folks that we know from our previous careers to do the job. Now, I would have liked to see a fair, transparent process and maybe attorney of color that can, you know, maybe see all sides of a situation, hired or even considered. Even if Attorney Murphy was still going to be hired, that whole process just doesn't sit well with me. So that's a comment, and I'm hopeful that when we get the internal, the IIU's process in place, that things like that do not continue to happen. I also did ask for a list of who's currently on the IIU's team, and I haven't gotten that yet. So I would like to know what members of the police department are on the IIU team, because we want to know who's looking at these cases, because if it's going to be, the same traditional folks that wasn't expediting or giving punishments or doing their job appropriately, then nothing's really going to change. Then you mentioned that some of the policies and procedures are complete. And I want to know if you could just tell me one or two of the policies and procedures that have been completed.
Well, I'm sorry that you didn't receive the list. I thought Deputy Daniels was going to send that out Tuesday morning, but I'll make sure that gets out tomorrow, and I apologize for that.
That's no problem. That's no problem.
And I'm sorry, I'm having a senior moment at this point. What was the last question that you asked, Counselor?
Oh, I just asked, can you give us one or two policies and procedures that have been completed? Is it like training or I don't know?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. We have, we normally have a meeting with DOJ on Wednesday, and today, I think the people in Boston and Washington and here in Springfield, we all had conflicts. So our weekly meeting is going to be tomorrow afternoon. But the last meeting we had, I believe that the actual use of force policy, we were at a point where that had been basically given thumbs up by the Department of Justice and was going to be put into place so that it could be announced to the officers. And then I believe the use of force on pursuit, and there was one other use of pursuit, a use of, what's that? Foot chase, a use of force on foot chase. All of those are very, very close to being implemented. And once the DOJ gives us the final thumbs up, they will be presented to all of the officers in the department through the roll call proceeding. And at that point, they will begin the scheduling of in-service training that goes on each year, and those policies and procedures will be put into the part of the training program that every officer receives.
Thank you, Judge Payne. And then my final comment is, and question is, Attorney Murphy, is he a city resident?
I don't believe he is.
Springfield resident?
I don't believe he is, Counselor.
And I don't think he has to be because it's a contract, he's not being hired as an employee, and I don't know if this is something that Counselor Fenton can answer.
Counselor Fenton.
Municipal contractors are not subject to the residency ordinance.
Thank you, Counselor.
Okay.
Counselor Whitfield.
Thank you. So I just want to just reiterate that, when you don't live in a particular city, you might not know all the plights and things that happen to a particular group. And if you're not in that particular group, you might not understand. So what may seem like it doesn't need to be escalated to one, in fact, knows that it makes a difference. And it's all about fairness and transparency. And anything else, anything less, results in a large part of residents thinking it's more of the same. So I would encourage the law department, police department, when you're considering these positions, to make sure that the process is fair and transparent, because to me, as I look at it, it doesn't pass the smell test. And that would be my final comment, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Whitfield. We're going to go to Counselor Perez, who is in person, followed by Counselor Davila, who is remote. Counselor Perez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have been meeting with many residents, and the concerns they have raised, they were happy of having the police commission because they thought from the beginning that was the issue that we fought for, that police commission to be the mediator. Right now, the information that I'm getting from the residents, they feel very intimidated to go to the police station to establish a complaint. You know what? The confidence with this creation of this policy and procedure and having, I heard your policy and the steps that has to be taken, and the police commissioner, I feel, and this is from the point of the residents, that they are last in the process. So for the point of record, this is a concerns that coming from the residents. First of all, they feel intimidated going to the police station or whatever establishment has been created. By the time that the police commissioner have the information, there's already decision making. So those are the concerns that the residents are feeding back to me as a city council. And we were hoping that we didn't have the repetitive history that we had. I had a family abuse, and I'm not saying that all police are bad. But you know, as a family member that was mine, I went through a lot with this person because aftermath is the mental health and everything that comes to play a role. It's not only the abuse, it's the suffering of the family, it's the suffering of the person that been abused. And then to create a docket number, and that list, that great list, we need to see that list, because then who we gonna believe? So I just want to raise that the residents are feeling that we are the same steps that we were in 1986. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, if I could just indicate so that, again, it's on the record. People can file complaints in many different ways. They don't have to come to the police department. They can get a complaint form here. They can go online and get a complaint form. They can make a complaint, they can register a complaint by phone. As I said, the department will take complaints that are anonymous and attempt to investigate on those matters. So I just want to make sure that people understand no one has to go to the police department to file that complaint. And I think we've tried very hard to make that clear to the public, but I want to reiterate that one more time.
Thank you, Solicitor. Councilor Perez.
Could I answer to that? The population that I serve does not have the luxury to go online and create a complaint. Regardless how the complaint gets to the department, it's going to get to a department that they feel intimidated. So that's the issue. It's not the filing of the complaint. It's the process of the complaint itself and how it gets filtered to others. And this is the residents informing me. They don't believe in this process of complaining. I'm concerned because it's that we need to create confidence within the community. I saw the list of abuse complaints and I was puzzled. This is new to me because I was on the other side of the fence. Now I'm seeing this process, and I was part of the process back in the 80s, and the community still doesn't feel satisfied with the process. And I'm just saying it because I have been meeting with many residents that they are informing me that they don't feel confidence with this process. So I think by what you inform, and Judge Payne, I know that you work very hard. The police commissioner is seen fifth in the line in receiving the information. How are we going to address this? I don't know. Probably we're going to have to meet as city councilor, but this is many residents. I'm not talking about 1, 2, or 3 that has been in my office saying we were hoping that the police commissioner played a major role when it came to the complaint. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Before we go to Councilor Davila, I just want to let folks know, so it is currently 6:25. We are still on discussion, which is appropriate, of the DOJ consent decree. I think that in the next 10 minutes, we should move into discussion on the police commission directly. And certainly, I think, many issues have been identified in Councilor's remarks already, so these are things we should be thinking about as we move forward. But we'll go now to Councilor Davila. Councilor Davila, who is remote.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening to all of you. And thank you for all those involved in this process. And Solicitor, thank you for your explanation. I do have several questions, and Mr. President, they speak to the Police Commission themselves, but I do want to ask one now, if you indulge me. And Solicitor, you have mentioned that we are sitting at a table working on the policies and procedures, which is great news to my ear, because I do concur with Councilor Fenton that this is paramount to develop policies and procedures. But who's sitting at the table right now developing policies and procedures?
Well, the members of the Law Department, members of the Police Department, members of the Department of Justice, and members of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Those are the people, and to some extent, greater or lesser, the compliance evaluator. Those are the individuals that are working on the policies and procedures.
So where is the Police Commission?
The Police Commission does not play a role with respect to the establishment of the policies and procedures. They will be involved when those policies and procedures are in effect, and should any officer violate those policies and procedures, they will serve as the method upon which discipline is undertaken.
So they are going to be acting upon policies and procedures once. So let me see if I understood you correctly. So they are not at the table writing the policies and procedures, but they are going to be acting on them once required.
Once all of the policies and procedures are in place, their responsibility would be to serve as the fact finder and the judges should there be allegations of violations of the procedures. The people that are working on the policies and procedures, quite frankly, are the experts in this field, and it is something that is taking place on a day-to-day basis. Literally hours upon hours and hours are being spent by members of the Police Department, the Law Department, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is not something that is done 1 or 2 hours a day. It is something that goes on hours and hours each day.
Right. Yeah, so I have no doubts whatsoever that those people in the room not only are expert, but also they're smarter than at least me. I will recognize that. However, I do have a little thing for the average Joe, which after all, that's who we serve. So with that, sir, so just to make sure that I understand, you are telling me, sir, that these smart people are sitting at a table and they're working very diligently to come up with policies and procedures. And once those policies and procedures are enacted, the police commissioner are going to use that to make determinations, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to implement those? Who's going to say, yes, this is approved? Who's going to vote? Who's going to enact them? Who's going to say, yes, this can go on as a policy and procedure?
Well, again, we negotiate with the Department of Justice. We reach an agreement as to whether or not this is the policy that both parties want to have enacted. It will be reviewed by
who are the both parties?
The both parties are the City of Springfield and the Department of Justice.
Okay. So basically, if I understand you correctly, the police commissioner has no role whatsoever in writing policy.
No, they have no role in writing the policies.
Okay, and that's straight from the DOJ?
The DOJ has set out the roles for the police commission. It's part of the settlement agreement, and it does not involve the police commission being involved in developing and implementing the policies and procedures.
Okay, and I'm going to go back to that later because I do have a plethora of questions. So to be honest with you, I'm not quite clear, Solicitor, but I'm going to ask you the last question on this round. And that is, sir, if you made a comment second, third time that I hear you make this comment publicly, sir, and I think that you do have some solid ground, of course, sir, when you say that, or you make a parallel that they are quote unquote judges, or that they are going to be making decisions, of course, and they need to be completely impartial when they're making decisions. And I have no doubt whatsoever that these fine people, who are also experts, may I say, in their respective fields, will be impartial. But at least I don't see why they can be made, at least from what I'm understanding, what you have been saying, sir, that they cannot be made aware that complaint XYZ exists and that is being going down the channel. Because as I say, like I see it, and I agree with Councilor Govan, is they're told at the last minute only if they see fit. And so my question to you is, why can't they at the very least, be made aware that a complaint of XYZ was filed and it was allocated to this channel to be processed?
Well, again, Counselor, if they want to know whether or not there are complaints that are pending, I certainly think they can ask that question. But if you start to get into a situation where you're telling them about facts and allegations and complaints, being specific about it, then quite frankly, you have set up a situation where, should they then hear that matter, I think that they, quite frankly, will be asked by the lawyers for the officers to recuse themselves. And if they don't recuse themselves at that point, should they impose discipline, I am very comfortable in saying that an arbitrator or an administrative law judge from civil service will flip that decision. It's that simple.
But that, right, I agree with you, that's very simple, but I still don't understand, Solicitor, that they're told, for example, in this month, we have 3 complaints of abuse of power, or we have 3 complaints of failure to become an officer, unbecoming of conduct. We had 3 complaints of whatever. That's not given details. So if I understand.
I think I've said that, Counselor. If they want to know whether or not there are complaints, I think they're certainly entitled to ask that question. And
right. So go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, I think they're entitled to ask that question. But if you get into any sort of specifics, then you potentially prejudice the case, and that doesn't serve anybody's best interest. And so, quite frankly, that's my, and I'd also let you know, these aren't thrown at the commission out of the blue. We reach out to the commissioners and we say, look, we have some hearings that we're going to try to schedule, and what is your availability, and then try to set that up. So and we don't call them up on a Monday and say, look, we're going to post an agenda item for Thursday.
Right. So basically, at least, so that, and we'll finish with this, Mr. President. And Solicitor, thank you for your this candid discussion, sir. So it will seem to me then that, if I understood you correctly, that if they choose to, the police commission could say, give us a report of how many, without any data, without any specifics, how many complaints of abuse of power, how many complaints of whatever complaint it is, without getting into details. But that's a decision they have to make. I know that if I wasn't the police commissioner, I would definitely want to be asking that question. And personally, as I have stated before, Solicitor, I am concerned that they're not being aware. And I do think that they should be asking that information. I would like to also point out that the police commissioners, they're not a judicial body. They're part of the management chain, as I understand it from the ordinance. But Solicitor, I thank you so much for this round. I will have some more questions, and I look forward to another good conversation. Thank you, Solicitor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. President. Solicitor, just based off of what I'm hearing, it sounds like folks are hearing from their constituents that they want the commission to play a much larger role in the complaint process. And so I guess my comment would be that it would make folks feel more comfortable if they were able to get as much information as possible without prejudicing the hearing as possible. And I think it stretches a little further than you hinted at in terms of what it is that they can receive. And so I guess my thing would be, it'd be nice if they could receive all of what it is that you think that they ought to receive. And I don't see any reason why they can't receive all of the complaints that come before the IIU department. It doesn't make sense to me why they wouldn't be able to do so. So at the very least, that folks know who's filing complaints and how many complaints are coming before the IIU department, and not just the complaints that get sent up to them. And I think residents would feel more comfortable with that as well. I guess my question to you, though, is there anything within the consent decree that prohibits the administration from sort of stretching the reach of the commissioner as it relates to creating these policies and procedures? Like, I know the DOJ might have laid out what it is that they'd like to see the commission do, but is there anything that prevents us from sort of expanding their role?
Well, I think that would be something that would have to be raised with the Department of Justice to see whether or not that would conflict with how the agreement has been set out. And again, I would just to reiterate to some of your earlier comments, I don't see any reason why the commissioners cannot call the IIU and ask for a breakdown of the number of complaints. I think that they can certainly ask for and receive information about those matters that have been handled internally pursuant to the consent decree with disciplinary actions. Again, my concern, and I cannot stress this enough, my concern is that if they start getting information about a matter that is likely to come before them, then we are basically guaranteeing that should discipline be imposed and an appeal is taken, that the officer would win that appeal. And I don't think that serves the city well, and I certainly don't think it serves the department well. So I've said it 2 or 3 times. I won't repeat it again.
No, I hear you. I hear you, Solicitor. I guess what I would argue is that I highly doubt that the superintendent who had the ultimate say prior to the police commission and to the new responsibilities of the police commission, I highly doubt that she wasn't privy to the complaints that came before the department. And, if we follow your line of logic, then a lot of the cases would have been overturned if she would have been privy to the facts and the individuals who had complaints filed against her. I just have to believe that she played more of an active role and at least knew what was happening within her department. And it just seems to me that the police commission is in no different position, and they ought to be receiving just as much information as Superintendent Clapper used to receive as it relates to the issues going on within the department that are disciplinary. And so I don't think we had an issue with the superintendent hearing these particular facts of a particular investigation before, and I just don't see that the same thing can occur with the police commission. So just my thoughts, but it definitely sounds like the police commission needs to have a more expanded role, and that will put the public at ease. And we ought to, if we're interested in appeasing the public, which I think is first and foremost, we ought to see that that occurs. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. So, Councilor Brown and Councilor Whitfield, I see you both are in the queue. I do think we should transition this meeting to a discussion on the Police Commission. I think we have pretty much entered discussion on the Police Commission at this time. So, to Councilor Brown and Councilor Whitfield, would you be amenable to holding your question into this portion? So we might assume discussion on the Police Commission directly.
I'd like to ask him a question.
Okay, Councilor Brown.
Judge, do you remember Captain Brown, my father?
I remember him a little bit, sir, yes.
Okay. On the record, so my other colleagues could understand, the DOJ actually is here, I would think, based on the work of my father. He's talked to the feds as far as the corruptions. I believe people don't really understand the work that he's done, and he was head of internal affairs, and he should have been the first black chief of police. I petitioned for him to be able to work. Not only would he know what you have to do when it comes to what the police commission could do, he would make it succeed, but he was just passed over. He wasn't even considered. And to me, that in itself is what the issue is. Have you ever called him? You don't know who he is? Judge?
Sir, I've never had any reason to call your father.
Head of Internal Affairs, the most honest black police official who's very respected in the black and brown community. No one ever wanted to talk to him. You didn't understand the things that he was doing in order to change some of the things. You didn't know that?
Sir, I was not involved in any of those issues, and my focus has been on trying to get the settlement agreement finalized. I came in late in that process, and since then I've been working strictly on the policies and procedures. So I have not spoken to anyone outside of those that I deal with on a regular basis.
Okay, so I would just do your research. I appreciate your work. Do your research when it comes to the honest black and brown people who understand exactly the policy and they know all that crooked stuff. Call Captain Brown, okay? He'll explain it to you guys. Can you do that for me, Judge?
I will certainly give that all consideration, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Councilor Whitfield and Councilor Davila, are you amenable to moving into the second portion of the meeting? I do appreciate our guests that are here. I want to be respectful of their time and allow for that. Councilor Whitfield, would you be amenable to that?
If I could just make one quick brief point, Mr. President. I just want to suggest that we actually look to hire another attorney to have another set of eyes, preferably a person of color. And have the law department come forward and request the same funds that they requested before. Kevin Murphy tapped the department on the shoulder and asked for the position and was given to him. I certainly don't want to take away his contract, but I don't feel comfortable with the selection process. I don't think it was fair and transparent, and I'm getting a lot of feedback that the public does not think that what's going on currently from the administration, from the law department, is a fair and transparent process. I certainly didn't think that was a fair and transparent process. I actually have been vocal about that. I'm going to continue to be vocal about that because that's just not the way that we should do things. Get tapped on the shoulder and be like, yeah, I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to give that to my friend. I would like a different set of eyes that's not friendly with anybody on the police department, not friendly with the folks in the law department, maybe know each other, but definitely not friendly. And I want that to be taken into consideration, Judge Payne, because I really am not myself trusting this process. So I just want to make that point, Mr. President, and I think that I'm ready to move on. Sorry.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. And Councilor Davila, are you amenable to moving to the second portion of the discussion?
I don't have any particular objection. I just, if you afford me, Mr. President, I just have one question to the solicitor, but if assured that I could get that question later, I will have no objection, sir.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. All right, and so I do want to be cognizant of the time, and certainly these are issues of great magnitude, so I am not surprised nor inconvenienced by the length of the discussion. I do want to be respectful to the members of the public, the guests that are here, and to my fellow councilors, but I do think that we should enter into a direct discussion on the implementation of the Board of Police Commissioners. Solicitor Payne, I know you were just at the podium for an hour, but I'm hopeful that you may be able to join us again just to give your perspective and the administration's perspective on where we stand on implementation, and then we will take some questions prior to our adjournment. And again, we greatly appreciate your presence and your answering our questions.
Well, the commission has been established. The commission is working. We have had several hearings. We're trying to schedule some additional hearings. We're working on policies and procedures for the commission as set out by the settlement agreement, which requires us to come up with some additional policies and procedures regarding the commission. It is still a work in progress, and we continue to try to provide the commission with the support that I think any police commission had received in the past. We do have the ability, as I've said before, for them to use the facility up on Page Boulevard. It eliminates the need for people to have to come in our hearings to come to the police department where people might otherwise feel intimidated. We make those efforts, and so that's where we are.
Thank you, Solicitor. Before I open it up for questions, I have a few basic questions myself that I'd like to ask, and I expect that we'll hit on a number of topics relative to the implementation. Some of these are fairly basic questions, but they are questions that we are receiving from members of the public, and I think they are also questions that have been raised through committee meetings that have been held by our colleague, Councilor Davila. And so at the most basic, where are the physical headquarters of the Board of Police Commissioners? Where do they, where does that body live?
Well, I don't think that there's a designated physical headquarters. I mean, in the past, when there was a commission, before it was abolished in 2005, there was never at which point the commission was very, very active in a number of different areas. They never had a designated place. They came to the police department. At that point, 130 Pearl Street was about the only police facility in the city. We didn't have the locations that we have today, such as up on East Street, the Training Academy, or the Page Boulevard facility. So everything was done at the police department. So there was never a designated place for them to say, here's the police commission office. Again, we have the Page Boulevard facility. It is a place that is conveniently located. There's parking. It's right off the highway, I think it's not. I don't believe it's an intimidating issue. There's when people come in for hearings, there are, other than the IIU staff, there are no other police officers present, other than those that might be the officers who are, for lack of a better term, the defendants in the police commission hearing.
So the primary administrative location is the Page Boulevard facility?
That's the way I see it. I mean, if they want to go to the training academy, I'm sure we can do something with that. I don't get a sense that they want to have a place at 130 Pearl Street. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do, but that has never been raised to me by any commissioner.
Just let the record reflect that Councilor Allen has joined the proceedings remotely. What administrative support staff is currently available to the Board of Police Commissioners?
There is an individual who is the secretary to the commission. This individual works in the superintendent's office, but her responsibility is to reach out to the commission members, to set up hearings, and I think she can provide them with other aspects of what they may request. And again, I don't know what they might be requesting other than certain reports, which we try to get them, obviously, well before a hearing date.
Does that individual have other administrative responsibilities that are not to the Board of Police Commissioners?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
And what legal resources are available to the Board of Police Commissioners? Who's their primary legal advisor? For example, we have Attorney Shea. Who do the Board of Police Commissioners turn to for legal advice as they consider a case?
Well, I think at this point they turn to me. I mean, we have not, as you know, we're still short-staffed in the law department, and because this is a newly enacted entity, and we're going through all of the different processes of trying to get them up and running with respect to the issues that they have to handle, and simply because I go back 40 years, and one of my first jobs after being a prosecutor was to be the lawyer to the Springfield Police Department, and so I worked very closely with the then commission. So I have some sense of what has to be done, and so I've kind of taken that responsibility on myself.
Is that the plan for the foreseeable future, or is there a plan to allow for them to have, for example, Judge Payne, you may not be solicitor forever.
Believe me, I'm not going to be the solicitor forever.
Is the idea that the solicitor will always be the primary legal resource, or is there an expectation that further legal resources
I would hope that when we
developed?
can we're trying to beef up the staff right now. That as that continues, I would like to see an attorney appointed, one of our attorneys be designated as the attorney for the department and the commission.
Is there a timeline for that type of appointment?
No, I mean it's all money and trying to get qualified candidates.
Okay. Last couple of questions from me. What's the status of the commissioners' formal training? Is there formal training planned for them, professional development? Do they have access to those types of resources?
Well, we've had a couple of meetings where I've kind of set out what their responsibilities are during the course of a hearing and how a hearing is conducted and how they deliberate and so forth. I'm still trying to figure out what other training that we might be able to provide. And again, all of this comes at the time that we're in the last 8 or 9 months. We've had the return of a police commission. We've had the issue regarding the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. We're dealing with the post-commission and all that requires of the department, and we're dealing with the accreditation issues for the department. So would I like to have done a little bit more up to this point? Yes. Will I try to do more in the next couple of months? Yes, but I'm hopeful that in the next several weeks we will be able to put together and put to bed the policies and procedures, at which point we'll free up some time that I have to deal with other matters.
What is the timeline on the policies and procedures being completed?
Well, there are timelines that are set out. We've had to expand them a little bit simply because I think when they were initially set out, we didn't, neither the city or the Department of Justice really thought about the role of the compliance evaluator. So we're giving the compliance evaluator the opportunity to review these policies and procedures so that the policies and procedures then go out to the public for public comment. But as I said before, we've made, I think, significant progress, better than I thought we would do. And again, I give all credit to Captain Bellevue for the work that he has done on this. I think if we can get that straightened out, hopefully within the next month or so, we should be at a point where the policies and procedures are settled on, other than, again, the IIU procedure, simply because of the collective bargaining issues that still have to be resolved.
At this time, I'll open it up to counselors who may want to pose questions. Seeing no counselors rising in person, we'll go to Counselor Davila, followed by Counselor Govan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be rather brief. I realize that it's getting a little late, but Solicitor, before I give you my question, I want to say that I agree with you. I look forward to the day that the law department is fully staffed. And thank you for taking all this work. I realize that you have a lot of work on your plate, sir. And so I'm in agreement with you, sir, that we need to continue staffing up and attracting the best qualified candidates to the law department. Solicitor, you mentioned that the compliance evaluator, once the policies and procedures are completed, they're going to review it and they're going to go out for the public for review. What does that mean?
Well, the public has a right to take a look and make comments to the city and the Department of Justice and the compliance evaluator about any thoughts that they might have regarding these policies and procedures that we're working on.
And if they do recommend changes, what happens?
Well, I mean, I think that those will be taken into consideration. It depends on the nature of the comments that they might make. But I mean, clearly, the Department of Justice has ideas as to what they want to see in the policies, and the settlement agreement that we have sets out some of the issues that we have to put into those policies. So it's open for comment. Whether or not those comments will result in significant changes, I really wouldn't say.
Right. So, Commissioner, excuse me, my apologies. Solicitor, I will keep it brief. So my final question, sir, is you talking about policies and procedure, you made several references to the DOJ. Then my point and question to you, sir, is has the DOJ required that the policies and procedures be developed without involvement of the Police Commission?
I'm sorry, Counselor, I heard that the DOJ in the city...
Has the DOJ required that the policies and procedures be developed without the involvement of the Police Commission?
They haven't raised that issue at all. Again, this is something that is done by... I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but these are policies and procedures that are being drafted on a legal format based on a legal settlement agreement in the federal court, and so that's basically how it's being done.
Right. No, I don't think you're being disrespectful. I'd also quite the opposite. I think you were truly calling a gentleman. So just to be clear, the DOJ has not required that the policies and procedures be developed without the Police Commission.
They have not asked for or required or sought the involvement of the Commission with respect to the development of the policies and procedures.
So the decision of the Police Commission not to be involved in the policy comes from where then?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question, sir?
So the decision that the Police Commission not be involved in the drafting of the policies, where does that come from?
Again, I think the policies are based on the legal principles that are in the settlement agreement and are based on both the concerns of the police department, the law department, and the Justice Department. And so we're using, again, without being disrespectful to anybody on the commission, we're using people who have some expertise in the requirement and the necessity of developing these policies.
Right. So the commission could inject itself if they wish to, right?
Councilor Davila, can you repeat that?
Yeah, the question was to the solicitor then, so my line of thinking is that if the police commission chooses, they could inject itself to the policies, into the drafting of policies and procedures. After all, they're going to be voting on them.
I don't think that at this point there's going to be any additional input from anyone other than the compliance evaluator and any comments that the public might wish to make. We're far along in the process. We're close, as I say, on several of the policies. We're there.
Right, and that's great news. But I'm saying I'm sure there will always be more policies, and I have made my opinion public on this before, so I'm not going to rehash that in this format, solicitor. So anyways, to ask my last question, I just want to reiterate that the DOJ has not required that the policies and procedures be developed without the involvement of the police commission.
They have not.
Okay, and so, Mr. President, thank you, Solicitor. And Mr. President, if I may, my question is, maybe you can shed some light. What can we expect some sort of a report from the O'Toole's?
Councilor Davila, can you repeat your question?
Are you asking?
I'm just wondering, when can we, or maybe the solicitor, if he knows the answer, when can we expect a report from the?
When can we expect the report from O'Toole Associates?
I believe that comes within the next couple of months. They have certain dates that they have to report, and as I said, the O'Toole group were in town last week. They had what I think Kathy O'Toole described was a meet and greet at the Ray Jordan Center. But they will be coming in to have a public meeting to explain what they're doing, where we are with respect to the consent decree. I don't have a date on that, but I believe it's within the next month or so.
Thank you, Solicitor, again. Thank you for your work, and I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for doing this. I look forward to the next committee of the whole. I will continue having the public safety meeting, the monthly meetings. After all, as Council President Letterman stated in his opening remarks, we want to have the best. And I've always said I want the best police department. The question is how we get there. I have a plethora of other questions, but I think I'm going to come back with those later. But I mean, the Solicitor, I really thank you for your work. Thank you. Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Before we go to Councilor Govan, I just want to take a brief liberty because it speaks to Councilor Davila's question. Solicitor, and it's not a gotcha question, and it's one that we can discuss in the future as well, but a portion of the ordinance that was passed by the City Council and upheld by the Supreme Judicial Court has a section titled Relative to the Responsibilities of the Commission, Rules for Maintenance of the Police Department. And it states in relevant part that the Board of Police Commissioners shall make such lawful rules for maintenance of the police department, hereinafter referred to as a department, including the regulation, government, and discipline of such members and employees, and goes on to speak about some other things. So I guess the question that I have, and I think that a lot of councilors have and that members of the public have, is that when the Police Commission was enacted and passed by the City Council and went through the judiciary process, the assumption was that the buck was going to stop with the Springfield Police Commission, that there would certainly be professional officers in charge of the day-to-day operation of the Springfield Police Department, but that ultimately the Springfield Police Commission would have that responsibility. And so I'm wondering, I understand what you're saying about the process put in place with the DOJ to develop the policies, and we expect and recognize that that will include community feedback. But I guess I'm wondering how the policies could then be adopted without being finally approved by the Board of Police Commissioners.
Well, again, I think that that's something that will be determined at some point in the future, probably at the time that there is a new commissioner or superintendent, which I believe happens in about 18 months. But the decision of the SJC was somewhat opaque, and while it reestablished the commission, it did not. I mean, I could read a portion of the decision if you want, but they didn't address some of those issues regarding, the power to restructure the police commission, because they indicated that that issue was never raised before them by the plaintiffs. So the issue of what powers the commission has and the powers of the council with respect to the commission really is for another date. It's another time. You know, we have a superintendent. The superintendent has a contract, and that contract provides the superintendent with the powers that are set out in that agreement. And any attempt right now to change that, quite frankly, results, in my opinion, in a interference with the contractual rights that the city has with the superintendent, and I think opens up the city to potential liability. So, if that answers your question.
Well, I'm not a legal scholar, solicitor, but I think we will have to delve into this in the future. I think because I think we're gonna hear a number of questions before we adjourn that speak to it, and I think it speaks to really the crux of the concern that exists. And let me be 100% clear: it's never personal, right? It's about the laws that were passed in the city, the council's obligation to enforce them, and our ultimate goal that I think we all share, which is to have a system that can be trusted and respected by members of the public and members of the department. We all want a fair execution of justice. So
I don't take anything personally.
I appreciate that. Just stating. So I think we'll probably come back to that, but we'll go to Councilor Govan now.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Judge Payne, I want to thank you for your 40 years of service to the city of Springfield as the attorney and as the helper, I guess, of the last commission. And with that, I guess my questions, I guess, would be after the DOJ did their investigation and they came out with the report, it was determined that the city of Springfield's police department, just probably like every other police department in every other city in this country, had structural racism embedded in it, right? And when people talk about structural racism, they're not talking about individuals, right? What they're talking about is policies, is procedures, is basically the guidelines and the rules that these systems, the police department is a system that they operate under, which causes them to treat people differently, to do what all the councilors actually talked about doing. Councilor Brown, Councilor Perez mentioned it. I mentioned it before, right? So my concern with the commission, and I'm glad that Councilor Letterman talked a little bit about what the reason the police commission was put into place is that right now, this administration fought against the police commission for a very long time. I think it took over 2 years for the Supreme Judicial Court in the state of Massachusetts to finally say that we needed to have a police commission. And at this time, I feel like the police commission that's enacted because of an ordinance that the city council put forth is not being taken seriously. Do you know why there are no commissioners here at this meeting?
I do not.
Okay. So you said that 40 years ago, or when the last police commission was in place, they didn't have a space, they didn't have, resources or whatever. And to me, when I look at that and when I hear that, I feel like the result of that was that a DOJ investigation had to be made. And of course, at that time, we know what happened. The city went into receivership, we abolished the police commission, and started a whole process of hopefully fixing our city, right? I love the city of Springfield, just like all the other councilors said. I want to have the best police department in the country. And I think that we can achieve that if we listen to our constituents, if we listen to the residents. The residents are fearful of the police. Police officers don't want to be police officers anymore in this department. And that is because of a whole history of structural racism, of, inequality, just like Councilor Brown said, his father not being promoted because he was a Black man that still happens today, you know, and the reason that we have the O'Toole group, why we have a consent decree, all of that is supposed to be addressing the issues that we are experiencing right now. And I believe that the police commission could be a very useful tool in helping to accomplish that. But it seems like it's still not being taken seriously. And I guess my question, and no disrespect to you, sir, is to the city council. I was not here during the time when the police commission ordinance was made. I guess I would like to hear more. Maybe council president or another counselor might want to enlighten me on what the purpose of the police commission was when you guys decided that we needed to have it. I don't know who wants to answer that.
Councilor
Councilor
Govan,
Hurst?
I'm happy to.
Yes, sir.
I'm happy to discuss that anytime. I do want to make sure we have time for all the councilors to ask questions that do want to ask questions. Would that be amenable to you?
That would be amenable to me, and I thank you for that. So I just wanted to highlight that. And again, Judge Payne, I thank you for your service throughout all these years. But we have some really serious issues in the city of Springfield, and a lot of them have to do with the way things have always been done. And it's time for us to do things differently. And I think that this, the police commission is a different way of doing things, and that we need to give it a try at least. So just want to thank you, and I wanted to make those comments. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Seeing nobody present in person who's rising, we'll go to Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Govan, for bringing up structural racism, systematic racism, racism in general still happens. We had got a letter anonymous letter from some of the officers of color just talking about what they face and what they're dealing with. And it really hasn't changed much. You know, I'm scared. My godson was, we all know, killed by an officer. And while the commissioner at the time, Fitchett, didn't think that it was a serious matter, the civil court did and awarded his family. But no amount of money could ever bring this young 15-year-old boy back. And it just pains me that it feels like more of the same. It feels like more of the same in hiring. It feels like more of the same in decision making. So my question is, how would the public be able to give feedback on policies that are being created without someone at the table from the community? Is there a community representation at these meetings when the policy decisions are being made? Because some policies are almost completed and we haven't even seen anything. So I'm trying to figure out how that takes place. How do you get feedback from the community on policies? Or is that a next step?
Well, that's the next step. The policies, when the DOJ signs off, that they're comfortable and we're comfortable, they are put out for public comment. I'm not indicating that public comment is going to change any of those policies, but it is that is the process that has been set out by the Department of Justice in the settlement agreement.
In the settlement agreement, well, the Department of Justice is here. Is someone from the Department of Justice here?
No, they don't attend. And again, no disrespect, they don't attend. They don't attend political meetings. So
I understand.
Yeah.
Councilor Whitfield, just to answer your question, if I might, we did extend an invitation to representatives of the Department of Justice with the assistance of the Law Department, and they did indicate that they weren't authorized to speak publicly, but we could explore in the future if it's possible for us to meet with them in executive session or through some other mechanism.
Perfect. I think we should. I think there should be public representation at the meetings when we're creating these policies, because the policies that are being created affects the public. You know, I've had family members, I mean, when it was normal for my family to come in and say we were harassed, beat up by the police, blah, blah, blah. My nephew was beat up, my nephew was killed. Like, these things were normalized in the community, and now we're tired of it. And we're also tired of the structural, the systematic racism that continues to happen time and time and time again. It has got to change, but based on the hiring practice so far, based on what we're hearing about the police commission, can't even help make the decisions on the policy. I don't feel much of a change, and the public doesn't feel that either. They feel like it's more of the same, and we hear this. This isn't just coming from me, but it is coming from me because I'm a Black woman in the city of Springfield with a Black son and a Black daughter, and I know the treatment of our folks for a long time, forever, and still today. And we don't hire a person of color to oversee the initial cases that come in. So we don't really know what's going to be passed on to the police commission. And I don't feel that's right. I'm going to send a very detailed email to the finance team to see if we can get another $30,000 to hire an additional attorney. And I'm hopeful that it won't be a tap on the shoulder, but it'll be a process that's transparent and fair, because this doesn't seem like it is. And it's painful. It is painful to sit here and listen to it, because the same structures that's been in place for centuries is still taking place. Thank you, Mr. President. That's going to be my final comment. I do have to go. I have some duties to attend to, but thank the council. Thank you for holding this meeting. Thank you, Judge Payne, for your years of service and also taking on this task, because I know it feels like you're getting beat up, but we have to do our job as the appointing authority, just like you do. You've done your job as judge and everything else, but we do appreciate you in this role. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. It is 7:16. My intention is to adjourn this meeting at 7:30. And again, we greatly appreciate our guests, members of the public, and counselors. And this is certainly not the final conversation. This is, in many respects, the beginning of the conversation. I do want to recognize Councilor Hurst at this time.
Can I get my question answered, though? Can we have a member of the public at the meetings? Can I get that answered?
This is certainly, Councilor Whitfield,
if
if you wanted to put that in the form of a question, I would be amenable. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, Counselor. I think the Department of Justice pretty well sets the tones as to who attends, and quite frankly, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I think it would be somewhat difficult for one person from the public to be selected. I can imagine there'd be a bunch of people that would not be overly happy that someone else got selected. So, but that's not going to, I can tell you that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Councilor Hurst?
I guess that speaks to the larger problem, Solicitor. As we start talking about, structural racism and breaking down these barriers, seems like we're doing everything in our power to keep it in place, to keep these systems that have essentially oppressed our communities for years in place. The idea that we need to rely on the DOJ to invite a community member to the table, or multiple community members to the table, and we're not advocating for that just because that's the right thing to do, is problematic. The fact that it seems that the administration is doing everything in their power to set up the police commission to fail is also representative of a system that doesn't want to change. Zada, to your point, hiring, firing, promotion and discipline is what I signed on for the police commission to do and for them to be in charge of. In addition, the police commission was supposed to be a liaison to the community so that the community would build trust between the community and the police department. And so the fact that they don't have any involvement in the hiring is problematic. The fact that they don't have any involvement in promotions is just as problematic. And, discipline and firing is great, but they're not even at the table to create the policies that ultimately they're going to be using to fire and discipline folks. And I think this has less to do with the DOJ and more to do with our lack of desire to ensure that folks have a seat at the table. And if you take anything away from this meeting, you ought to take away that we want a seat at the table and that we're going to continue to fight to get a seat at the table. And right now, we are not there. We are not there. And it's frustrating because we're having the same conversations. I'm baffled and I'm not there. I apologize. You probably can tell in my voice that I'm under the weather, but I'm baffled that not one of the commissioners showed up. And so I guess, Councilor Letterman, did we invite the commissioners? Did we have an expectation that they would show? Because Councilor Davila just had a meeting and only one commissioner showed, and it felt as though she showed because she didn't get the memo. And so, you know, I guess, did we invite them? Since the whole second portion of the agenda is about them, and really the bulk of this meeting has been about them.
Thank you for your question, Councilor Hurst, and an invitation was extended to the Board of Police Commissioners.
And so the idea, did you receive any message or correspondence that they weren't shown?
I spoke with their chairman last night, who indicated to me that he intended to be present this evening.
So if he intended to be present this evening, I assure you, he got the memo from someone up top saying that he shouldn't show up. Because that's not like Gary. I know Gary. And Gary wants to make a difference in the community. And so the idea that he's not there means he was told not to be there. The same way that they were told not to be at Councilor Davila's meeting. And so we got to dig deeper. We got to realize that this is a deeper problem. And the system that the mayor and the administration operates in is the problem. That's just, we may not want to accept that reality, Mr. President, but that's the problem. And so if it takes us going back to court to figure this out, then God's doggone it, we got to go back to court because the community wants to see a difference. And right now, it just ain't happening. Thank you, Mr. President. Those will be my final words tonight, too.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Brown, and then we're going to go, unless there's anybody in person that would like to remark, we're going to have Councilor Davila have the last comment before we adjourn. Councilor Brown.
Yes, Mr. Solicitor, I want to know, is it possible to make a council committee that would be a part of some of the overseeing?
You were asking about who? I'm sorry, to make a part of the...
Instead of the community, I would feel comfortable if there were certain council members who would be able to be a part of it. So say like Council Letterman, he understands, you know, I do a lot of that stuff, but I know Council Letterman, say Councilor Fenton, Councilor Hurst. We couldn't make a city council, like a committee that could help with some of that overseeing stuff? Would you guys be willing to do that with us?
Well, overseeing what, Counselor? I'm not quite sure what it is you're asking to be overseen.
Councilor Hurst just had issues that he just reiterated to you. I'm just saying, is there a way that we can have a committee as far as he can head it? And now you can work with us in order to answer some of those concerns.
I would be glad to speak with the council president about that after this meeting.
And I want to try to work together, but I do understand what a lot of my colleagues, their concerns are. So I would want to be able to have some of them who I know are their lawyers. I mean, Councilor Hurst's a lawyer. Counselor Fenton's a lawyer. Counselor Letterman, he's a lawyer. Mr. President is a lawyer. So there's certain people who I think we can just figure this out somewhat. If we can maybe make a committee and we can work with you guys as far as figuring out some of these concerns. And Mr. President, I would want you to try to maybe make Councilman Hurst the president, make him the chair of it. And I definitely would want to be a part of it so we can figure this out, because some of these practices, it's just about really being fair and doing the right thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Let the record reflect that I am not an attorney. And we will go to Councilor Davila, and then I'll close us out. Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will definitely be brief. And I don't have a question for the solicitor, more of a recommendation, if I may, Mr. President, and that is that I have noticed, like Councilor Hurst pointed out, there seems to be a pattern here. First of all, let me say that from the bottom of my heart, I thank you, the police commissioners, for serving. They are very capable and expert people within their respective fields. The mayor chose them to lead the police commission. I like to believe that he chose them because they're capable people. But I am noticing a pattern here that they are not showing up at the table. And they have got to show up at the table of the police commission. They got to stop being, I have to say it, afraid of their own shadow. They have to stop being afraid of their own shadow. And so I will recommend to you, Mr. President, humbly, that we may consider just having a check-in meeting, committee of the whole, just them. And believe me, they are going to be hard pressed not to show up if this entire wise, humble body calls them and they don't show up. So, because this is the second time in a row that they don't show. So, there's just my humble opinion, Mr. President. That's entirely up to you, sir. But just to reiterate that I am very concerned of the pattern that I'm noticing. I don't know why. I'm not going to make assertions, or I'm going to speculate in public, but I do feel my obligation, not only as a city councilor for Forest Park, but also as the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, to point that out, sir. Because as I say again, the goal here is to have the best police department. It seems to me that there is some difference of opinion here. I am not clear on a lot of things. And I thank you, Mr. President, because I think this has been an extremely productive meeting, and I just can't wait to see the next meeting. And I will be, to finish up, Mr. President, I will be scheduling another meeting within the next 3 weeks or so of the Public Safety Committee to continue talking about policies and procedures within the police department. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to all. God bless.
Thank you, Councilor Davila, and let me move us into closure of the meeting by again thanking the members of the public, Solicitor Payne, Deputy Chief Kent, the members of the City Council who were present with us both virtually and in person. As I said at the beginning of our hearing tonight, these are monumental reforms, and so I don't think any of us should be surprised at the length of the discussion. I don't think any of us should be surprised at the questions that were asked here tonight. And to the point of one of our colleagues, we have a professional obligation to the people of Springfield to be doing this oversight. We have a professional obligation to members of the Springfield Police Department and to every aspect of the community to make sure that these reforms happen in the light of day. And I do want to say what I'm going to do is put together, after reviewing the tape from this, I'll put together a series of the questions that I think came up that may not have yet been resolved. I will forward those to the individuals who were present with us tonight. And as I said, we're leaving here with a lot of work to do. And we will come back here for another checkpoint in the future, hopefully after the issuance of the first report by the compliance evaluation, or the compliance evaluator. And the final thing that I want to say is what I would say to members of the commission if they were here, which is that they have a great deal of support for the reform that is the Springfield Police Commission. They have that support from the City Council. They have much of that support from the public. I've heard much support from officers that I know for making sure that there's a fair and transparent system. And so I want the Springfield Police Commission to know that I see it as a very serious obligation of the City Council to make sure that they have the support and resources that they need to be successful. And that is part of the reason why we want to have these checkpoints. So again, thank you so much to everybody who was present tonight. We will continue to come together. And thank you. I want to give a special thank you to the solicitor for taking so many questions and for standing before the council for such a length of time. We will now stand adjourned.